And they'll spend usually about a month, sometimes a little bit more, in those cages prior to going into surgery. They all have their gallbladders removed, and during that time our vets also clean up any adhesions or any other problems that are happening within the abdomen and give them a really thorough health check, more than this cursory one, to make sure that they're ship-shape before they go out into a rehabilitation area. These are just some pictures of the staff getting the bear back into the recovery cage and reversing the anesthetic. Yeah.
The recovery cage is a little bit bigger, so they can move around.
They're a lot bigger. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute that'll kind of give you some more of the dimension, and they're much bigger. Yeah. There was a whole crowd of people watching this process. What happened was, when we found out the bears were coming in, Jill sent a call out to the Animals Asia offices in various countries around the world and said to staff, please feel free to come over and watch this. We really want you to be a part of it. So there were staff members from Hong Kong, from the UK, Australia, Germany, and then Alice and I from the US there. There was a reporter from a London newspaper who was there covering the whole process. But probably the most important guests there at the time were members of the Chinese government. It was the first time that government officials had come and watched bears actually being taken out of the cages and going through health checks. And it was the first time they saw the condition these bears were arriving in. And it's interesting, ironically enough, one of the government officials who was there, her name translates in English to Madam Bear. And she was extremely affected by this whole scene, and on leaving promised that she was going to look into it and try to partner with us to help bears that are still on farms. These are some of the cages that those bears came in, and in the back you see little Noah, who's about, a year and a half, crawling around. He's the son of our Australia director, and he came along for the trip. So these are the recovery cages. They're in a polytunnel. And the polytunnels are there both to keep these bears separate from the rest of the bears so that they can have a little bit of peace and quiet and not be stressed, and also to serve as a quarantine area so that if they are ill in any way, they won't affect the rest of the population at the sanctuary. And you can see here that the cages are a lot bigger than the ones they had been in the farms. And they receive enrichment round the clock in these cages. So as you can see in this picture, there are browse on top of the cages, basically leaves and bamboo shoots and things that they can pull through and make a bed and play with. There's also, in the very back of the cage, you can kind of see this blue tube and this white tube. They were both filled with treats, and the bears had to manipulate them to get the treats out. The bears receive ice lollies, so big groups of fruit frozen that they have to kind of dig through the ice to get to the food. And you can see that the bears are actually able to sit up in these cages, probably for the first time in their whole life. They can sit up, they can turn around, they can fully stand in these cages. This is one of our staff members bringing the bears their daily meal, and what they eat mostly are fruits and veggies. But they also ate something called stinky tofu, which is the most disgusting thing I've ever smelled in my entire life, but the bears loved it. Well, probably in the wild they won't get past 20. In captivity they can live much longer. They can live into their later 20s. In the wild it's going to be a shorter lifespan just because of the difficulty finding food and all the different challenges that are out there. So after we left the polytunnels and that group of very new bears, we went to the second newest group of bears. These are bears that have been at the sanctuary for about a year or two. And they're in a small area called the rehabilitation area. It's our smallest enclosure at the sanctuary, and it doesn't include really dramatic climbing structures or anything where they could really hurt themselves, because these are bears that are just learning how to be bears for the first time. But they did have a lot of fun. These are two bears that were fighting, or I should say playing actually, trying to get dominance over this swing. They both really wanted it, and this one won out. And the next few pictures are just photos from that rehabilitation area showing the bears walking around and playing on the play structures and under the play structures, and sometimes just entertaining themselves with a stick or a tire. But mostly what the bears are doing here is learning to forage. when they live on the bear farms, they're actually deprived of food most of the time. As with humans, a body that is deprived of food creates more bile. And so the bears are basically starved so that they'll produce more bile. And usually the only time they're fed is when they're being milked for their bile so that they can be a little bit more docile during that process. And the food they're receiving is not high quality, not a lot of nutrition in it. So at the sanctuary, what we do right off the bat is introduce them to the idea of foraging, and we hide their food all over the enclosure and really make them work to get it so that they can be stimulated mentally and they can be exercised physically. And so we hide things up in the trees and the different climbing structures. And again, freeze things. Here, another ice lolly hanging from a rope, some frozen fruit inside that big ice cube, and that bear worked at it for a very long time. And even with all that wonderful area to explore, some of the bears just want to go back inside. This is the oldest of our bear houses. It's not fancy, but the bears are happy there. We've built several new houses since we took over this wildlife sanctuary, and I'll show you those in a minute. But the bear dens, or the bear houses, I'm sorry, basically have dens in them much like our dog runs with guillotine doors. And bears can move from den to den and visit with their neighbors as they wish. And then the guillotine doors can be closed if there are certain bears that need to be kept separate for behavior issues or health issues. They spend the evenings inside the dens, and then they're out during the day. And one of the coolest things is to see the bears come out for breakfast in the morning. At 9 o'clock sharp, a bell rings, the doors of all of the bear houses open, and the bears just come flying out looking for food. And then at night, at 5 p.m., the bell rings again, and the bears kind of hesitantly make their way back into the dens because they know that their food is there. And some of the bears choose not to come out at all, like little Asia. She's our oldest bear. Alice, do you know how old she is? She's late 20s, though, isn't she? Yeah. She's our oldest bear, and sometimes on nice warm days, she just doesn't want to come in, and we think at her age she shouldn't have to. So she just gets to sleep outside. This is what the newer bear houses look like. There are several of these throughout the sanctuary. There are about 8 or 9 different enclosures throughout the sanctuary, and bears are grouped based on their disabilities and their abilities. So the younger, stronger bears are going to be together, and bears that are perhaps missing a limb, which is quite common because so many of them are caught in leg hold traps in the wild. Those bears will be together so that they can't hurt each other. So these are their accommodations, and this was our accommodations. This is actually Alice's room, and you can see the view outside is of a bear enclosure. How cool is that to wake up to? It was just the most amazing thing in the world. Some of us went up onto the roof to get a better view of this enclosure because it was just so special to be able to sit there and or stand there and watch the bears. And in fact, from the top of the dorm that we were staying in, we had a good view of several different bear enclosures. And it's kind of hard to see, but up here on top of this enclosure is a staff member. And every once in a while we'd look up and we'd see staff members on top of the bear houses. And what they're doing is monitoring the bears. They know these bears like the back of their hands. They know who's eating, who's not, who's getting along with who. It's phenomenal. They have such incredible knowledge of the bears on a daily basis.
Are the staff Chinese or?
It's a combination, but actually the bulk of the staff at the sanctuary, there's about 140 staff members there, are local Chinese. There are both paid and volunteer staff that come in from around the world who are basically the vets and the vet techs and the senior bear managers. But the people who are feeding the bears, monitoring the bears on the daily basis are from the local village. And we also employ many of the local villagers in raising the food for the bears. So it's actually been a really great thing for the surrounding economy. Yeah.
Are they all like altered when they have the surgery? Or?
The males are, yeah. Christina decided to take a closer look at one of the bears, and Alice caught this shot, which I think is so sweet. And she was out there for a while. This bear just came right up to her and laid down, and they just kind of looked at each other, and it was wonderful. It was really sweet.
In the farms, are they breeding the bears, or are they going out in the wild?
They're doing both. Initially, they were all wild caught. As time has gone on, they're breeding more and more cubs there. So we will see cubs that have never been out of a cage in their life.